In 1978, a tax consultant named Ted Benna was scanning the fine print of the Revenue Act when he stumbled upon a loophole. It was barely 500 words long, Section 401, Paragraph K. He didn't know it at the time, but that accidental discovery would systematically dismantle the guaranteed pension, shift the entire financial risk of survival onto the backs of employees, and funnel over $7 trillion directly into Wall Street. The 401k was never designed to be a national retirement system. It was a tax dodge for wealthy executives. And perhaps the most terrifying part is that even the man who invented it now admits he created a monster. To understand the magnitude of this error, you have to look at what was quietly stolen. Before 1980, the American retirement contract was built on a defined benefit model. It was a simple promise. You give a corporation your loyalty and labor for 30 years, and in exchange, they guarantee you a paycheck until the day you die. The company bore the risk. If the stock market crashed, or inflation spiked, or you lived to be 100, the company was on the hook to pay you. It was their liability. But when Section 401k appeared, corporate finance departments saw an irresistible opportunity. They realized they could dismantle that liability and replace it with a defined contribution model. Notice the shift in language. It sounds technical, but the implications were violent. Under the new model, the company only promised to help you save. The outcome was no longer their problem. They initiated what economists now call the Great Risk Transfer. Almost overnight, the burden of funding a 30-year retirement was shifted from professional pension fund managers to ordinary employees, people with zero training in asset allocation, market cycles, or actuarial math. We were sold a story of empowerment. We were told we were becoming investors in our own future. We were given brochures with smiling couples walking on beaches and charts that always went up. But that was 40 years ago. The experiment has now run its course. The first full generation of 401k users has reached retirement age, and the data paints a picture of catastrophic failure. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the median retirement account balance for Americans aged 55 to 64 is approximately $185,000. For those 65 to 74, it drops to around $164,000. Let that sink in. Financial experts agree that a safe withdrawal rate is 4%. That means the typical American retiree, after working for 4 decades, has saved enough to generate a passive income of roughly $500 a month. That isn't a retirement plan, that is a poverty trap. We are looking at a system where the vast majority of the workforce is mathematically incapable of ever stopping work. And yet, when we look at our dwindling balances, we blame ourselves. We think we bought too many lattes. We think we weren't disciplined enough. We internalize the failure because the system is designed to make us feel like the problem is us. But what if the 401k isn't failing? What if it is doing exactly what it evolved to do? Because while you are staring at a balance that won't last 5 years, the financial industry is looking at a gold mine. The 401k didn't just transfer risk, it transferred wealth. It took trillions of dollars from the security of guaranteed pensions and poured it into a fee-laden casino where the house always wins, regardless of whether you retire on a beach or in a basement. And that is just the surface, because when you actually peel back the layers of how these plans are structured, who selects the funds, who sets the fees, and who writes the regulations, you realize that your lack of wealth isn't an accident, it is an engineered outcome. If you are watching this and feeling a knot in your stomach, I want you to know something. You are not crazy, and you are not alone. When I started this investigation, I expected to find a story about bad math. Instead, I found a story about mass psychological trauma. Recent surveys reveal a terrifying statistic. Nearly half of all Americans now fear running out of money more than they fear death itself. Think about that. We have built a society where the abstract terror of a depleting bank account is more visceral than the biological fear of dying. We live in a state of quiet desperation. It is the feeling you get when you open your mailbox and hesitate before grabbing the bills. It is the calculation you run at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering if you can afford to lose your job or if you will be greeting customers at Walmart when you are 75. For years, I felt this too. I followed the script. I went to university. I got the corporate job. I saved the recommended 10%, and yet the finish line kept moving further away. Every time I thought I was getting ahead, inflation or a market correction or a once-in-a-lifetime economic crisis would reset the clock. I internalized it. I thought I must be doing something wrong. I thought I needed to budget better. I thought I needed to hustle harder. But then I found the documents we are about to go through, and the guilt vanished. It was replaced by something much colder: anger. Because when you look at the timeline, you realize that this anxiety isn't an accident, it isn't a bug in the software, it is a feature of the operating system. The system relies on your anxiety, it needs you to feel insecure, because insecure people are obedient employees. Insecure people don't ask for raises, they don't take risks, and they certainly don't retire early. If you want to understand how to break out of this system, you need to understand how it was built. And that is exactly what we do on this channel. We dismantle the financial traps designed to keep you poor. So, if you value truth over comfort, make sure you are subscribed. Because what I am about to show you next is the mechanism of the cage. To dismantle the trap, we have to go back to the scene of the crime. We have to go back to 1974, to a piece of legislation that was supposed to save the American worker, but ended up selling them out. It is Labor Day, 1974. President Gerald Ford sits at a desk in the White House Rose Garden. With a stroke of his pen, he signs the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, or ERISA. At the time, this was hailed as a victory for the American worker. For decades, corporations like Studebaker had been collapsing and taking their employees' pensions down with them. Thousands of people who had worked the assembly line for 30 years were left with nothing. ERISA was supposed to stop that. It created strict federal standards for funding pensions. It created insurance to guarantee payouts. It was designed to make the defined benefit pension bulletproof. But in Washington, the road to hell is paved with regulation. By making pensions safe, the government also made them expensive. Suddenly, corporations were legally on the hook for billions of dollars in future liabilities. CFOs panic. They start looking for an exit strategy. They need a way to offer a benefit without the baggage of a guarantee. They didn't find the answer in a think tank or a congressional committee. They found it in a loophole. Fast forward to a Saturday afternoon in 1980. A benefits consultant named Ted Benna is sitting in his office outside Philadelphia. He is trying to design a bonus plan for a bank client. He is thumbing through the recently passed Revenue Act of 1978, a boring technical tax update. He stops at Section 401, Paragraph K. It was a tiny provision, barely a page and a half of text. It was intended to settle a minor dispute about profit-sharing plans. It was never meant to be a national retirement system. But Benna saw something no one else did. He realized that if he twisted the language just right, he could create a system where employees contributed their own money pre-tax and the company could match it. He pitched the idea to his bank client. Their reaction? They were terrified. Their lawyers told them it was too aggressive, that the IRS would shut it down. They said no. So Benna did it himself. On January 1st, 1981, his own firm, the Johnson Companies, launched the first 401k plan in history. It was an accident, a tax hack, a consultant's creative interpretation of a few lines of code. But for corporate America, it was a miracle. They realized they could replace the expensive guaranteed pension with this new, cheap voluntary savings account. They could stop being the parent responsible for your survival and start being a partner who just provides the platform. The shift was swift and brutal. In 1980, over 30% of private sector workers had a guaranteed pension. Today, that number is barely 10%. They swapped a paycheck for life with a savings account dependent on the stock market, and they sold it to us as freedom. But here is the most damning piece of evidence I found. It is not a statistic, it is a confession. Ted Benna, the father of the 401k, is now in his 80s, and he has spent the last decade trying to warn people about what he unleashed. In an interview, he said explicitly, "I created a monster." He notes that the system has become so complex, so fee-ridden, and so dangerous for the average person that it should be, in his words, blown up. Think about that. The architect of the system you are banking your life on says it is a disaster. Why? Because he knows what happened next. He knows that once the door was opened, Wall Street walked in. They saw trillions of dollars of fresh capital flowing from your paycheck looking for a home. and they built a machine to harvest it. This brings us to the mechanics of the trap. Because the reason your account isn't growing as fast as it should isn't just the market, it is the fees you don't even know you are paying. When you look at your 401k statement, you see a list of numbers: your contributions, your employer match, and the total balance. It looks like a bank account. It looks safe. It looks like a benefit provided to you for free. But in the financial world, there is a golden rule. If you cannot see the price tag, you are the product. The 401k industry is not a public service. It is a for-profit ecosystem comprised of record keepers, third-party administrators, custodians, and mutual fund managers. And they are not managing $7 trillion out of the kindness of their hearts. They are doing it because it is one of the most lucrative business models in human history. To understand how the trap works, you have to look at the one number they try desperately to hide from you: the expense ratio. On the surface, it looks harmless. You might see a fee of 1% or maybe 1.5% attached to the mutual funds in your plan. Your brain sees 1% and thinks, that is nothing. If I make 7% returns and they take 1%, I still keep 6. That is a fair trade. That is the single most expensive mathematical error you will ever make. Because fees don't work like simple subtraction. They work like compound interest, but in reverse. We call this the tyranny of compounding costs. Let's look at the data. Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard and arguably the conscience of the investing world, ran the numbers on this before he passed. He calculated the impact of a 2% fee over a 50-year investment lifetime. Most people assume a 2% fee reduces your final nest egg by 2%. The actual number? It consumes 63% of your potential wealth. Let me repeat that. If you invest for 50 years and the financial system takes a 2% cut off the top every year, they end up with nearly 2/3 of your money. You put up 100% of the capital. You took 100% of the risk. But the system took the majority of the profit. This is not a fee, it is a confiscation of wealth. And you might be thinking, well, I am paying for expertise. I am paying professional money managers to beat the market for me. This is the second lie of the hidden design. We have decades of data on this, specifically from the SPIVA scorecards, the S&P indices versus active reports. These reports measure how well professional fund managers perform against a simple, unmanaged index fund. The results are embarrassing. Over a 15-year period, approximately 92% of active large-cap fund managers failed to beat the market. Think about any other industry in the world. If you hired a plumber and 92% of the time they flooded your house instead of fixing the leak, would you keep paying them premium rates? Of course not. But in the 401k system, you don't have a choice. And that is by design. Most employees are given a menu of funds to choose from, usually 10 to 20 options. You assume these options were vetted by your company to get you the best performance. But investigate how that menu is built, and you find something called revenue sharing, or more technically, 12B1 fees. It works like a supermarket shelf. Why are certain sugary cereals at eye level while the generic oats are on the bottom shelf? Because the cereal company paid for the placement. In the 401k world, mutual fund companies often pay kickbacks to the plan administrators to get their high fee funds on your menu. Your employer often agrees to this because it lowers their administrative costs. The plan administrator agrees because they get a steady stream of cash. And who pays the bill? You do. Through higher expense ratios that silently bleed your account dry month after month, year after year. They have built a system where the default option is almost always the most expensive one. They utilize a psychological trigger called inertia. They know that if they auto-enroll you into a target date fund with high fees, 90% of people will never change it. They bank on your boredom. They bank on your confusion. So, we have a system where you take all the risk, you have no control over the options, and you pay fees that can eat half your wealth to managers who statistically cannot do their jobs. And that is the system working exactly as it was designed. But the real scandal isn't just that the system is inefficient. It is that when you actually run the math on what this does to a human life, when you translate these percentages into years of freedom lost, the result is terrifying. And that is not even the worst part. Because once you see the real numbers, you realize that for most people, the math doesn't just look bad, it looks impossible. Mathematics is cold, it has no politics, it has no agenda. It does not care about your hopes or your hard work or the promises made in your employee handbook. And when we apply cold, hard mathematics to the 401k experiment, the result is not just disappointing, it is devastating. This brings us to the most painful part of our investigation. We need to look at the real numbers, not the glossy projections your HR department shows you, but the actual inflation-adjusted reality of what this system produces. Let's run a simulation. Let's take a test case. We will call him Michael. Michael is 30 years old. He is a model employee. He earns $75,000 a year. He listens to the standard advice. He saves 10% of his income and his employer matches 3%. He puts this money into a target date fund. If you plug these numbers into a standard compound interest calculator, the results look fantastic. Assuming an 8% return, by the time Michael is 65, he will have over $1.8 million. On paper, Michael is a millionaire. He wins. The system works. But this is where the lie hides. It hides in the variables they don't ask you to calculate. First, we have to talk about the silent killer, inflation. $1 million sounds like a fortune today, but in 35 years, assuming the historical average of 3% inflation, that money is worth drastically less. That $1.8 million Michael saved? In today's purchasing power, it is worth approximately $650,000. He isn't a multimillionaire, he is middle class. But we aren't done. Now we have to subtract the fees we discussed earlier. If Michael is in a plan with average administrative and fund fees totaling just 1%, that 1.8 million drops significantly. The tyranny of compounding costs eats away nearly a third of his potential growth. Then comes the government. Remember, a traditional 401k is tax deferred, not tax free. The government is a silent partner in your account. They own a percentage of your equity, but they haven't told you what that percentage is yet. They will decide the tax rate 35 years from now when Michael tries to withdraw his money. If we assume a modest effective tax rate of 20% upon withdrawal, Michael's nest egg shrinks again. So, let's look at the real math. After 35 years of discipline, after denying himself gratification, after riding out market crashes and recessions, Michael ends up with a portfolio that, in real spendable terms, can generate a safe withdrawal of about $25,000 a year. Combined with Social Security, which is currently facing its own insolvency crisis, Michael is not retiring to a life of leisure and travel. He is barely replacing half of his working income. He is surviving. He did everything right. He followed the rules. And the math failed him. And Michael is the best case scenario. Michael is the outlier who actually saved consistently for 3 decades. The reality for the average American is far darker. The National Institute on Retirement Security estimates the breakdown of the US retirement system is creating a deficit of nearly $4 trillion. That is the gap between what American households have and what they need to maintain their standard of living. We are looking at a generation of elderly poverty unlike anything we have seen since the Great Depression. Look at the data from Vanguard's How America Saves report. The median 401k balance for a 65-year-old is roughly $87,000. Apply the 4% rule to that. That generates $290 a month. That doesn't pay for rent. It doesn't pay for food. It barely pays for the electricity to keep the lights on. This is the mathematical proof that the experiment was a mistake. We took away the floor, the guaranteed pension, and replaced it with a lottery ticket. And for the vast majority of people, that ticket is a loser. When you stare at these numbers long enough, you start to feel a sense of suffocation. You realize that the game is not just hard, it is structurally designed to keep you on the hamster wheel. The system needs you to keep working, it needs you to keep contributing, it needs your capital to fuel the markets, and it needs your labor to fuel the economy. It was never built to let you out, it was built to keep you in. If you follow the standard advice, save 10%, invest in mutual funds, wait until 65, you are walking mathematically toward a cliff. At this point in my research, I felt hopeless. I looked at my own accounts, I looked at the fees, I looked at the inflation projections. I realized that the traditional path was a lie. I felt like I had been running a race where the finish line was moving away from me faster than I could run. I almost stopped the investigation there. I almost accepted that this is just how the world works, that we are destined to work until our bodies give out. But then, I found a discrepancy in the data. There was a subgroup of people who weren't falling off the cliff. They weren't just surviving, they were escaping. They weren't earning millions in salary. They weren't lottery winners. They were normal professionals, engineers, teachers, project managers, who had looked at this same broken system and found a backdoor. They discovered that while the 401k is a trap for the ignorant, it can be a weapon for the strategic. They found that the rules of money that keep the middle class poor are actually optional. They stopped playing by the rules of the institution and started playing by the rules of the wealthy. And once I saw what they were doing, I realized that the hopelessness I was feeling was exactly what the system wanted me to feel. Because if you think there is no way out, you keep working. But there is a way out. It isn't easy. It requires unlearning almost everything you have been told about money. But the math works, and that is where we are going next. Because the only thing more powerful than a rigged system is a person who knows exactly how to break it. If you are ready to see the escape route, I need you to do one thing right now. Check if you are subscribed, because the algorithm hates this kind of information. It prefers to feed you entertainment, not liberation. So hit that button and let's break the cage. The anomaly I found wasn't a glitch, it was a subculture. While investigating the failure of the traditional retirement model, I stumbled upon a growing community of people who were defying the actuarial tables. They weren't waiting until 65 to reclaim their time. They were walking away from their corporate careers in their 40s or even their 30s. They didn't have pensions, they didn't have trust funds, and strangely, many of them were using the exact same 401k accounts that were failing everyone else, but they were using them differently. Most employees treat their 401k like a savings account. They put money in, they pick a fund with a cool name, and they hope for the best. This is exactly what the industry wants you to do. It makes you a passive consumer of a high-fee product. The people who escaped the trap treated their 401k like a tax shell. They realized that the primary value of the account wasn't the investment menu provided by HR, which, as we have seen, is often garbage. The value was the tax code itself. By shielding $23,000 a year from the IRS, they were effectively getting an instant, guaranteed return equal to their marginal tax rate. But here is the critical pivot. They didn't let the money sit in the expensive, actively managed funds that benefit Wall Street. They discovered the weapon that destroys the tyranny of compounding costs we talked about earlier. It is called the low-cost index fund. This isn't a secret, but the industry spends billions of dollars trying to make you forget it exists. The research is irrefutable. Over a 15, 20, or 30-year timeline, simply buying the entire market, owning a tiny piece of every public company in America, outperforms almost every professional stock picker in existence. But the real magic isn't the performance, it is the price. Remember the 1% fee that ate 2/3 of your wealth? An index fund charges as little as 0.03%. Let's go back to our math. If you switch from a standard mutual fund charging 1% to an index fund charging 0.03%, you aren't just saving pennies. Over a lifetime of investing, you are keeping hundreds of thousands of dollars in your pocket instead of donating it to a fund manager's yacht fund. The escapees I studied were ruthless about this. They ignored the flashy brochures. They dug into the prospectuses. If their company 401k offered an index fund, they poured everything into it. If it didn't, they contributed only enough to get the employer match, because that is free money, and then diverted every other dollar into their own IRAs where they controlled the fees. They stopped being customers of the financial industry and became owners of the market. But lowering fees is only the defense. The offense, the strategy that actually accelerates freedom, is a concept called the gap. The traditional system tells you to save 10%. That number is arbitrary. It is designed to keep you working for 45 years. The math of early freedom is governed by a simple, brutal equation. Your time to retirement depends on only one variable, your savings rate. If you save 10% of your income, it takes 51 years to buy your freedom. That is the trap. But if you can widen the gap, if you can live on half of what you make and save 50%, the math changes violently. At a 50% savings rate, assuming average market returns, the time to retirement drops from 51 years to 17 years. 17 years. That is the difference between retiring at 65 with a broken body and retiring at 45 with half your life ahead of you. This is what the wealthy understand that the middle class ignores. Wealth isn't built by income, it is built by the gap between your income and your ego. The system is designed to close that gap. It bombards you with ads for cars you don't need and houses you can't afford, specifically to keep your savings rate low and your retirement date far away. The people who escaped realized that lifestyle inflation is just a tax on your freedom. Every time you upgrade your lifestyle to match your raise, you are tightening the handcuffs. So they did the opposite. They practiced lifestyle arbitrage. They earned high corporate salaries in expensive cities but lived like college students. Or they used remote work to live in low-cost geographies while earning high-cost currencies. They didn't see money as a way to buy things. They saw every dollar as a soldier that, once deployed into a low-cost index fund, would work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never getting sick, never complaining, to buy back their time. They built what is known as a freedom number. This is based on the Trinity study, a landmark piece of economic research from 1998. The study looked at market history and determined that if you have invested assets equal to 25 times your annual expenses, you are mathematically free. You can withdraw 4% of that portfolio every year, adjust for inflation, and statistically, you will never run out of money. This is the revelation. The 401k was designed to be a trap. It was designed to feed fees to Wall Street and keep you tethered to the workforce. But it is a trap with a loose hinge. Future. This is about the one asset you can never earn back. It is about the Tuesday mornings you spend in traffic instead of with your children. It is about the stress that shortens your life. It is about the freedom to say no. The system was designed to buy your time at a discount. Your job is to make it too expensive for them to afford. The 401k was a mistake, but staying trapped in it is a choice. The system was designed to keep you working. Your job is to build a new system that sets you free.